Welcome to Midnight Casebook, where every shadow hides a secret and every mystery begs to be solved. Tonight, we unravel the chilling tale of Father Brown and the Bird that whispered at Vespers, a fan-made story paying homage to the brilliance of G.K. Chesterton's legendary detective. We'd love to have you along for this enigmatic journey. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, share your theories, and if you spot any inconsistencies, don't hesitate to call them out. Your keen eyes and sharp minds help us craft even more captivating mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. The Guest Who Never Took Tea. The thunder cracked with a ferocity that shook the very bones of All Saints, the church bells tolling the hour as if to sound an alarm, a warning that something amiss hovered in the humid air. The lights flickered, casting long, restless shadows in the candle-lit chapel, where the congregation, a motley assortment of villagers caught between faith and superstition, clutched their rosaries with white-knuckled determination. It was within this bitter symphony of light and dark that Father Brown arrived, his brow furrowed not with apprehension, but a prescient awareness that the evening would not be merely a supplication to the heavens, but a confrontation with the malevolent forces that had seeped into the lives of his parishioners. As the evening progressed, the storm intensified, rattling the stained glass like a shiver running down a spine, and it was, against this backdrop of palpable unease, that an unexpected guest, a tall, gaunt man in a perfectly tailored grey suit, stepped into the sanctuary. His pallid face bore signs of distress, though whether from the weather or from some internal tempest, Father Brown could not yet tell. The newcomer slipped past the villagers, each one glancing askance at this apparition of discomfort, before approaching Father Brown, who offered a gentle smile. "Good evening to you, sir. Are you here for Vespers?" With a strained voice, the man confessed to seeking solace, the kind of indulgence that only the sacred space could provide amid the chaos of his life. But before the priest could administer his benediction, the man's countenance twisted in agony, an anguished confession spilling forth as words tangled around unresolved guilt and fear. "I fear my sins have caught up to me," he whispered, his voice trembling like a brittle leaf in the storm. "I cannot bear the weight." As the guests dipped their heads in prayer, a sudden scream shattered the solemnity. The villagers rushed towards the source, the locked study of Reverend Cook, where the clergyman was last seen before the storm, and the visitor became their focus. Forced entry was ruled out. The door had been bolted from the inside, and the only signs of disturbance remained in the man's absent form. Upon entering, they found him sprawled across the elegant Persian carpet, a shard of his own secrets embedded deep in the fabric of his life. He lay dead, a thin line of crimson stark against the deep blue of his suit, and in his hand a small, blood-stained letter, the ink still fresh and trembling with the weight of truth. As the villagers recoiled, Father Brown knelt beside the body, his breath steadying as the chaos churned around him. He took note of the surrounding details, the fireplace adorned with a tipped-over candlestick and the window slightly ajar, allowing the gusts of storm to swallow the room in frigid shadows. Least of all was the man's last confession simply a lament for his wayward spirit. It bore names, accusations, buried pasts that began to surface with seething urgency. "Such an odd gesture," he murmured, holding the letter aloft for the others to see. Why cling to such a damning fragment at the moment of his demise? Surely he desired release from this world, lest his sins accompany him into the next. At that moment, Mrs. Delancey, a gossipy widow with an insatiable penchant for intrigue, stepped forward, her voice quaking with conviction. It must have been him. Mr. Ward, he always had that dark aura, that sinister air of a man with much to hide. Her accusation was thick with fear, a lashed whip to the assembled souls. Eyes darted, suspicion twisting between them like the tempest outside. Yet Father Brown remained inscrutable, his mind racing through the fray, ever aware that appearances could cloak a truer reality. Last confessions, he pondered, an extinguished life, but what of the others entwined with him? The scorned lover turned indifferent foe, the jilted friend, each finished with their own script, laden with motives arching like shadows on the wall. Why would Mr. Ward kill such a man, even if he were not present? There is a deeper mystery at play here, I am certain of it. The eyes of the villagers rested upon him, urging him to see more than they dared to in their blind fear and accusations. Yet it was a dishevelled Mrs. Plumridge, her once steely resolve, breaking beneath the tremors of tension, who drew his attention. He came for our Vespers, she stammered. But he spoke of our debts, our family secrets. We cannot afford such burdens, Father. Father Brown pondered her words. Debts, grievances untold, unconfessed. These painted a picture, naughty with intrigue. How often had he seen the shadows of financial desperation masquerade as facades of decency? It seems, he concluded slowly, that our slain friend was an unwitting harbinger of the sin our village has long attempted to hide. But why the accuser presents himself as the victim? Outside, the wind howled, and furrows of rain pooled beneath the study door, a glistening multitude that concealed, like all good suspense, the undercurrents of truth. There must be someone among us with the key to this door, Father Brown declared, contemplating the violent disruption of a hallowed space filled with secrets of the heart. Suddenly, a distant howling echoed through the church. Was it a voice, a cry from the outside? And with it came the roar of another crash of thunder, deafening, as if nature herself sought to unearth the tomb of secrets concealed in the community's very core. And then the lights flickered out completely. In that suffocating darkness, a gasp from Mrs. Delancey, the click of a door unlatching somewhere behind him, an uneasy shuffle. Father Brown's heart sank with the dawning fear that the still waters of All Saints were far from calm, and that the evening had only just begun to unfold its deadly hand. Chapter 2. A confession untimely. A deafening crash reverberated through the air, striking Father Brown's heart with a jolt beyond the frenetic storm, as if the very house of God had shuddered at the announcement of its foul deed. The darkness swallowed the chapel whole. The candle flames snuffed into stillness, their waxen bodies now motionless remnants of a fleeting light. Murmurs of shock and disbelief slithered through the room, growing harmoniously with the rage of the tempest outside, while the frigid wind, now unbroken by the faintest illumination, howled through the narrow openings of ancient stone. "Stay close," echoed Father Brown's voice, a command against the ethereal sighs of the shivering villagers. He felt the weight of their fear pressed against him like a sudden thick fog, and he could almost see the shapes of their suspicions coiling around them, blanketing their faith in palpable dread. In the utter blackness, he reached instinctively for the crucifix hanging from his neck, an anchor to the familiar amidst the swirling uncertainties. We must find a light. The truth is obscured here, and darkness has a way of hiding the guilty. His words landed like stones on silence, yet as he turned, he caught sight of a familiar presence. The disheveled Mrs. Plumridge, her face ghostly white, her voice quavering as she clutched the pew with trembling fingers. "Father, we mustn't ignore what's been exposed. The letter, what it said, perhaps he finally spoke the truth aloud. My husband's name, it was in there. What if they come after us next?" The tempest tumult seemed to bow to her accusation, the atmosphere thickening with burgeoning allegations, a choir of regret sewn into every whisper of the wind. Father Brown steadied his breath, sensing a deeper unease, a morbid instinct whispering truths that writhed just below the surface. "What do you mean, Mrs. Plumridge?" he probed gently. "What else has been hidden?" Her eyes darted, scanning the shadows, as though they could expose unseen phantoms lurking among them. Reverend Cook was not just a troubled man. He knew of our troubles. Her voice steadied slightly, though laced with a quivering urgency. "He spoke of debts and disgrace. What have we done, Father?" Father Brown's mind raced, threading the darkness into what clarity he could muster. If Reverend Cook had engaged in such confessions, to whom had they been given? Villainy often wore a familiar face, but among the faithful, such shadows churned with deceit. "We owe it to him to unravel this tapestry," he stated, turning to find Mrs. Delancey still trembling in the corner. "And you, madam, what can you tell us of this gentleman?" She was rigid, her breath barely a whisper, yet the spark in her eye flickered with primal fear. "Mr. Ward. He came back before the storm," she managed, each word laborious, as if they bore a heavy weight. "I don't know what he wanted, but I saw him leave the church, alone." A sudden realization gripped Father Brown, and he stepped closer, his brow knit with contemplation. "Thoughts turned ill so quickly," he murmured, thinking of the shadows they all wore. For though the storm raged outside, no tempest proves mightier than that which brews unto the heart of man. Suddenly, a single candle flickered to life, a defiant ember against the pervasive darkness, casting an eerie glow that painted ghostly figures in their surroundings. The candlelight danced over the hallowed walls, revealing a figure, the tall, gaunt man from the previous eve, lurking near the chapel entrance, his gaunt features contorted between fear and contempt, revealing the delicate tension of a deer caught in the gaze of a hunter. "Reverend Cook." His voice was a rasp, slashed by guilt and something far more ominous. He knew too much. The villagers froze, but Father Brown stepped forward, the clerical collar around his neck a reminder of purpose. "And yet, here we find you untouched, Mr. Ward." His eyes darted towards the candle, then fell away. "I was at my end, Father. I sought his counsel." "Yet counsel comes at a cost," Father Brown interjected swiftly. "What did he threaten if you refused to pay?" A flicker of anguish crossed Mr. Ward's pale face, and he recoiled as darkness pooled behind him, a protest to his conscience. The debts, the scandal. Words left him like leaves in the wind, and in that charged moment, a torrent of thunder broke above them, drowning the chapel in darkness once again, the air electrified with anxiety. Yet before the candle died once more, glimmers of paper fluttered like lost souls from Mr. Ward's hand, sweeping across the stone. Father Brown caught one, a folded envelope, frayed at the corners, soaked but legible. With hurried but careful fingers, he unfolded it under the flickering light, his heart drumming to the rhythm of revelation. The inked scrawl, a damning note littered with names of families and debts, secrets laid bare, each name a confession of cowardice and desperation. This is a ledger," he murmured, the revelation striking like a bolt of lightning. The candle sputtered, and for an instant, Father Brown glimpsed truths buried neatly alongside lies, the network of entanglements coiling tight around every villager, payoffs and payments for silence. Shadows moved, voices tangled, and in the fragile moment that followed, Mrs. Plumridge's horrified gasp cut through the air, stark as the crack of thunder. "Father, listen! Where's Mr. Ward?" she cried, peering into the now consuming void where he had stood, the panic constricting like a vice around them. Father Brown cast his gaze where the man had lingered, only to find nothing but shadows. "Perhaps he has chosen to hide among his demons," Father Brown replied, the weight of understanding settling like a mantle on his shoulders. Yet the door groaned as it swung shut, sealing their fate within, and outside the storm howled with renewed ferocity, a band of frights and truths yet to be welcomed. "We've unturned a corner of the unseen," he said, gripping the note tightly in hand. "But what lies beneath the debris?" From outside came a hollow echo, a voice of approaching doom, announcing its arrival with the grim footfalls of fate. The sound of heavy footsteps bounding toward the church. And then a dreadful silence filled the air, heavier than before. It spoke of the grappled secrets, the sins disguised as sanctity, poised to shatter their world once more. The candle extinguished, and darkness closed in, mirroring the chaos of truths, waiting to emerge, a heart-stopping prelude to an unraveling woven tightly in a web spun from fear. Chapter 3. The Sermon Interrupted. The thunderclap erupted with a ferocity that rattled the stained glass, hung like mournful sentinels, drowning out the words of the sermon and sending a tremor through the congregation. A flicker of lightning split the oppressive sky, illuminating the horror that crawled across Father Brown's heart. The unmistakable sound of shuffling footsteps retreating in haste, a figure cloaked in shadow, vanishing from view just as the church plunged into spiteful darkness. The heavy air thickened, a scent of damp earth and fear merging into a miasma that cloaked the villagers, while candlelight, a beacon of warped reassurance, trembled under the inevitable collapse of the moment. "Stay where you are." The priest's voice resonated, breaking through the uproar of wind as it wailed through the eaves, clawing at the heavy oak doors. A chorus of gasps responded, hesitant and quaking, etched against the crescendo of the storm's fury. In that engulfing gloom, his hands scrabbled along the pulpit, searching for solace within the wooden frame, grasping tight to the familiar weight of sacred love. What madness had visited the church this Sunday? The thought screamed in his mind like the echo of thunder. Father Brown had entered the service expecting the solemn release of confession, but the environment had coalesced into a vortex of panic. "Please," he urged, his voice steadying the breathless murmurs of his flock. "We cannot let fear dictate our hearts. We must remain calm. Light is at work here, even in this darkness." From the rear of the chapel, a voice pierced the shroud. "But the doors! Who let him out?" It was Mrs. Delancey, her glimmering fear a candle of its own in the tempest of uncertainty. Father Brown felt the ripples of anxiety push against him, the press of secrets unsheathed too pungent to ignore. Just then, the oppressive atmosphere unleashed its full weight. The power failed, plunging the church into a silence so profound it felt suffocating. For a fleeting moment, as the world outside was consumed by howling winds, the villagers stood, frozen like statues, every breath anticipating the next crack of thunder, every heartbeat weaving tightly into the fabric of gathered suspicion. The only sound that broke the stillness was a whisper shrouded in panic. "Where's Mr. Ward?" Father Brown's brow furrowed beneath the dim glow of available torches illuminating hallowed walls intermittently, transforming the sanctuary into a realm of shifting shadows. Instinctually, his gaze followed the path the mysterious figure had taken. He felt it before he saw it. A disturbance, scenting the air like rain before a storm. A presence lost. Calming a shiver that ran through him, he raised his voice again. "We must continue the service, regardless of the storm or shadows. Let us gather together in prayer, for it may be the one light we hold." In the dim candlelight, a subtle tension crackled among them, particularly with Mrs. Plumridge, a woman too occupied by the play of flickering light across her face. He noticed the way her hands trembled as they clutched the edge of the pew, the phantom of another storm brewing therein. "He always knew where our secrets lie, Father," she choked out, eyes darting to the darkened corners. Reverend Cook's voice, warning against our debts. "He knew too much." "Secrets that bind us often come at a heavy price," Father Brown replied, a thread of understanding weaving tighter around his mind. "But this moment, amidst chaos, offers us revelation, if we are brave enough to seek it." He took a step forward, noticing a whisper of motion to the right, a shadow lingering beneath the righteous glow. And then the lights flickered momentarily, before the eeriness of twilight enveloped once more, casting faces into grotesque masks. "Did you hear that?" came a voice beyond the shroud of darkness, barely audible above the drumming crescendo of the storm. A reflection of human anxiety echoing against stone walls, memorizing cries of ethics long forgotten. "Hold steadfast," Father Brown projected, trying to anchor the panic lurching through the wooden beams and christened hearts. "We cannot allow fear to lead us into despair. Yes, shadows swirl around us, but it's the truth that shall pierce through even the thickest veil." And suddenly, from the corner of his eye, a glimmer, a slip of paper, attention-grabbing and dawning in its simplicity. It fluttered gently to the floor, a lone feather, carried on unseen winds. Father Brown crouched, grasping its edge, feeling the damp texture of fabric as he lifted it toward the brief flicker of candle flame. On the crumpled parchment, an inked signature alone, barely legible, befuddled by time and worry. "E.J. Davenport," he whispered, the air thickening with revelation, the ink capturing an essence well marinated in deceit. "Who is this?" "I don't know what you're going on about, Father," came an unexpected boast, the voice of Mr. Johnson, rising from the folds of uncertainty. "That man's name means nothing. He was no friend of the village, a drifter, a stranger." But as Father Brown's focus honed closer, memories rushed back, a man with a jaw set firm in the burgeoning face of innocence, a gentleman who held crumbs of knowledge not yet pieced into clarity. This letter informed them of more than mere debts. It touched upon names present within the fold of their very own fabric, persons who would rather remain hidden. "Yet he unwittingly connects us all, doesn't he?" he mused aloud, gripped by the words that echoed through stone and timber. The reaction was instantaneous. Every glance turned sharp, hardened against one another. Confessions hovered in the air, intoxicating. As a new gust of wind howled through the rafters, the doors banged against their frames, and momentary shadows flickered wildly. "Does anybody see what he is trying to say?" Mrs. Plumridge virtually pleaded, an edge of desperation stark in her eyes. Suddenly, amidst the turmoil, a chilling scream sliced through the air outside, echoing with finality within the fabric of night. a scream that blended seamlessly with the thunder that followed, louder, sharper than the storm, and with it, an uneasy whisper, coiling through the congregation. Father Brown's heart dropped at once, a sense of knowing unfurling tight within his chest. "It cannot be," he breathed, the candlelight revealing hardening faces etched in recognition. Once more, chaos erupted as the doors slammed open with an unholy force, revealing a figure cloaked in the storm's darkness, stained with oblivion and fear. Mr. Ward stood framed in the doorway, his expression twisted with horror, the drenched hem of his jacket a tapestry of secrets yet unveiled. And then, as thunder crashed again, drowning reason and fear in equal measure, he collapsed to the ground, forward, lifeless, a painted canvas splattering in crimson against the stone floor, spilling a revelation far more unsettling than the shrouded village had anticipated. The heartbeat of the storm had been mirrored, as had their own concealed treachery, and now they stood poised on the precipice of awakened truth. Father Brown rushed towards the fallen figure, heart racing with both dread and resolve. No, it cannot end here. The candle flickered one last time before yielding to the darkness, leaving the church plunged into a stillness rife with fear, uncertainty, and the unsettling truth that lay just beyond the veil of shadows. For in the heart of All Saints surged an electric anticipation that secrets under the storm had only just begun to unravel. Chapter 4. The Will in the Vicar's Study. An icy draught slashed through the dim confines of the vicar's study, as if the very walls were exhaling the secrets they had tightly encased for decades. Father Brown stood rooted by the antique mahogany desk, a brittle sheet of parchment slipping from his fingers and fluttering ominously to the floor as a crash of thunder drowned out the silence, a fierce reminder of the storm that hammered outside. The air was thick with an unsettling mix of damp, wood, and desperation, a sensation that coiled tightly in his stomach. He half-turned toward the door, instinctively wary. The memories of last Sunday's chaos stubbornly clung to the edges of his mind, and the present felt perilously intertwined with foreboding. "Stay back." The voice was sharp and brittle, issuing from Mrs. Plumridge, her eyes glinting like pale moonlight in the shadows as she stood just beyond the threshold, her breath coming in anxious gasps. "You don't know what you've uncovered. It could ruin us all." Father Brown's heart quickened, not merely from fear of utter disaster, but from the anxiety woven into her words. "What do you mean, ruin us?" His voice sank low, steadying the tremor that threatened to break through. "We must understand what this document holds." He gestured toward the disheveled desk, the forgotten manuscript radiating mystery under the flickering candlelight. The will, unsigned and tattered, bore the imprint of many long-held grievances. As he bent to retrieve it, an idea lost amongst the squabbles of inheritance twisted deeper into his thoughts. Behind Mrs. Plumridge stood others, a small gathering of anxious faces, each wearing a mask of concern, mingled with curiosity, not merely toward him, but toward one another. The late Reverend William Cook's passing had dislodged a nest of animosities, and he could sense the air crackling with suspicion, a powder keg, waiting for the smallest spark. "Do any of you truly think the late Reverend's wishes would be without doubt?" chimed in Mr. Johnson, his voice rising with indignation, painting a hypocritical portrait of outrage. "We all have our grudges. His sanctity was never without blemish. And yet you were the architect of treachery in his own home." A soft but steely voice interjected from the back, revealing Mrs. Delancey's presence, amidst the murmurs of intercession. Her arms folded defiantly, she held her ground as the storm outside rattled the window panes, producing another echo of thunder that sounded like a battle cry. "You don't trouble yourself to remember your own sins, do you, Johnson?" Father Brown's gaze narrowed on the escalating confrontation, each accusing word lashing at the undercurrent of concealed motives and deep resentment. There, just above the others, Mrs. Plumridge's palms pressed against the door frame, knuckles white as she held her ground. Amidst the rising tide of animosity, he focused on the will, bending low to examine the thick, yellowed paper, half imagining whispers of deceased spirits curling from its font. "It appears," he said, his voice rising above the charged tensions, "that this will has been damaged, yet still may impart a testament to the late vicar's intentions." "Why bother reading it?" Mrs. Plumridge's tone was laced with a nervous edge, and Father Brown felt a strange heat emanate from her presence, as if her desire to burn the past lingered just below the surface. What if it names someone unexpected, secrets that could destroy our family? "The dead can only speak what they wish on this side of silence," he replied, meeting her gaze with resolve. Shadows curled at the edges of her fear, mixing with uncertainty in an unsettling cocktail of dread. "We cannot allow our own shadowed guilt to tint the legacy left behind." As whispers meandered among the assembly, Father Brown turned an eye toward a small mahogany box atop the same desk. A glimmer caught his attention amidst the clutter of forgotten books and papers. With a furrowed brow, he slid it toward him, noting the fine craftsmanship, the sort not lost across generations. He breathed in the musty scent, careful not to jostle it like a prince handling a trinket of unimaginable value. "What have you found now?" Mrs. Plumridge snapped, anxiety lacing her words, but he disregarded her tone, lifting the lid to reveal a scrupulously folded letter, its edges frayed yet carefully preserved. The handwriting, he noted, was an elegant swirl, the ink a shade of deep indigo against the aging paper. He marveled at it, the inscription holding the weight of unfulfilled promises and foreshadowed betrayal. "This," he murmured, scanning the contents, "is not a mere correspondence." Safe behind that veneer of beauty lay words welcoming treachery, the mention of debts outstanding, shortfalls that could tip delicate scales of affection among heirs like fragile dominoes. So many voices, yet they remain unbroken, tangled in lies. "Silence can be more damning than a roaring confession," Mr. Johnson interjected, irritation flickering in his eyes. "We must all tread carefully." "There are debts among us we cannot afford," chimed in Mrs. Delancey, casting accusing glances around the room. Father Brown perceived a crack within that darkness, a small window into the truth they all sought to hide. Just as understanding flirted within reach, a spike of apprehension twisted the air tighter, an unseen thread that dragged the attention back to the storm thinning outside. Suddenly, a sound shattered through the cacophony. A muffled thud echoed like an ominous drum roll from somewhere deep in the bowels of the house. Instinctively, the villagers tensed, eyes widening, turning toward the door as that hush thickened into a vice grip on their throats. "Did you hear that?" Mrs. Plumridge breathed, almost inaudible, voice trembling lightly. "Perhaps it's simply the storm," suggested Mr. Johnson, but his own quavering reflected his denial. Father Brown felt the silhouettes of concern braiding between each figure, obscured beneath pools of hesitant shadows spilling around them. A second, jagged sound erupted, a distant scream torn through the night, causing every heart to race. The cries, punctuated by thunder, echoed with a terror that felt unnervingly familiar, resonating with the very fear that had gripped their hearts since the vicar's passing. "Stay here," Father Brown commanded, urgency spilling from his voice. Yet some part of him knew the veil had already been torn. As he turned to leave the room, torch held firmly in hand, the candle sputtered ominously, all but extinguishing the curious light. In that moment of distraction, he caught the glint of something upon the desk. A pocket watch, polished but somehow forgotten, lay open, awaiting attention. Vicar Cook's? How peculiar! He reached for it, barely able to pause, as a new tempest of sound erupted from below. Sharp, desperate footfalls, accompanying a wretched voice. "Help me! It's too late! They want the truth!" A figure emerged from the shadows into the doorway, pale and breathless, eyes wide with terror, silhouetted against the frenzied tumult outside. And with a gasp that froze time, the figure collapsed, crumpling at his feet. It was Mr. Ward, blood streaming from a dagger's wound, the pocket watch clanging against the wooden floor as it tumbled from Father Brown's grasp, slipping from life itself. The storm outside clawed at the windows, rageful as secrets twisted in the corner of shadows. A thunderous crack echoed, leaving death lingering in the air, an echo that promised only despair. And in that moment, Father Brown understood. The will had awakened the deadliest of truths, and time itself had begun unraveling in unforgiving fashion. Chapter 5. A Whisper Through the Trees. A scream pierced the tumult of the raging storm, sending shards of panic through the air. As Father Brown stumbled backwards, his heart seizing in his chest. Though the church lay in darkness, cloaked in the tempest's menacing embrace, the sound twisted through the night, like a haunting note from an unseen choir, dark and forbidding. Echoing whispers of dread coiled around him, urging him into action. "What is happening?" he murmured to himself, his pulse racing as he turned towards the window, the raindrops racing down the glass like frantic tears. Thunder boomed again, its resonance dislodging dust from the rafters, and with his heart pounding in rhythm to the storm, he slipped out of the church and into the deluge. Each step into the murky night led him toward the edge of the vicarage garden, where shadows writhed between the weather-beaten gnarls of ancient trees. It was here the scream had beckoned from, mingling with the cries of the wind and the relentless percussion of the rain against the earth. In that harrowing moment, Father Brown realized he could not approach this place with careless haste. The darkness concealed more than just the storm. As he made his way deeper into the garden, the familiar scent of damp earth and decaying leaves washed over him, a pungent reminder of the secrets hidden among paths seldom walked. Midnight insects buzzed their stormy tune, the symphony of nature flaring and fading in erratic crescendos. Yet amidst the chaos, something punctuated the air, an unusual series of cryptic bird calls, dipped and swirled like a code he longed to decipher. He halted, straining his ears against the storm's crescendo. A message from the night birds, he pondered, intrigued, for he had learned that nature, in its own mysterious way, often revealed what humans sought to obscure. He followed the sound, careful to keep his balance on the treacherous ground, now a slippery tapestry of mud and fallen branches. The calls led him to a small grove, where the trees leaned forward conspiratorially, their twisted branches weaving a canopy that shielded this small sanctuary, cloaked in shadows. There, the unsettling truth lay hidden, shrouded by the chill of the downpour. The calls ceased abruptly, and silence enveloped him as his gaze fell upon what could only be described as an omen. A delicate silver pendant, glimmering faintly amidst the detritus. Father Brown knelt in the mud, his fingers curling around the cool metal, lifting it from the shrouded ground. He recognized the design etched into it, a symbol of a family crest intertwined with ivy, a relic belonging to none other than Mrs. Plumridge, one of the most distraught faces he'd witnessed during the congregation's moments of chaos. The weight of discovery settled in his gut, as the practical implications unfolded in his mind like a fog dispersing at dawn. "So she has a connection after all," he whispered, feeling the pendant's coolness as it dangled before him, tremors of revelation rushing through. An unsettling feeling twisted within him, complementing the storm raging above. Could this be the tangible link that tangled Mrs. Plumridge in a web of suspicion? Doubt gnawed at his reasoning as he stood, the pendant cradled in his palm. She had claimed ignorance about the subsequent chaos that swirled since the vicar's death. Yet here was unmistakable evidence that bore her mark. He turned back towards the house just as heavy footsteps approached, squelching through the puddles that collected along the paths. Emerging from the veil of raindrops, shrouded in shadow, another figure approached, Mrs. Delancey, her wide eyes reflecting the storm's fury, body tense as though adrenaline still thundered through her veins. "Father Brown," she called, her voice strained, raw as if she had been shouting into the night. "Have you seen Mrs. Plumridge? I fear for her safety. These secrets, they'll destroy us, all." He straightened himself, holding the pendant firmly. "Mrs. Delancey, I have just encountered something that may explain more than you realize. This pendant belonged to Mrs. Plumridge," he said, allowing the silver to catch the faintest trace of moonlight peeking through the clouds. "Why is it here in the garden, I wonder? What connection link her to the anguish sprawled across these grounds?" Her face paled momentarily, a flicker of surprise mingling with fear as realization washed over her. I do not know," she stammered, yet the quiver in her voice betrayed her. But she and the vicar had issues, old grievances that knit them together and yet kept them apart. "I cannot see how that—" A sudden rustle among the trees interrupted her, an intruder stepping into their fragile moment. Mr. Johnson, flustered and disheveled, his coat flapping against the wind like a flag of surrender. "There you are," he exclaimed, the volatility in his breath clear in the stormy air. "Father Brown, we must return to the house. Something dreadful is unfolding. I swear I saw someone lurking just beyond the perimeter." Behind him, shadows darted in the distance, every footfall masking the truth that hid beneath the fury of the night. Father Brown felt the weight of the encroaching darkness upon him, sensing the threads of fate tightening around them. With unyielding resolve, he gripped the pendant tighter, a unique clue that blurred allegiances, and turned towards Mrs. Delancey and Mr. Johnson. "Then what are we waiting for? The shadows do not shift lightly, nor does their truth drift far." But as they hastily made their way back towards the vicarage, a third figure emerged from the gloom, cloaked in shadow, yet bearing the weight of anxiety, the unmistakable outline of Mrs. Plumridge herself. "Father Brown," she shouted, voice steady, yet laced with pleading urgency, a fresh glimmer of turmoil on her face as she drew closer. "Please, I need your help." Crack! A resounding gunshot shattered the storm's rhythmic symphony, the echo reverberating like a death knell through the garden. Father Brown's heart pounded, a primal terror clawing at him as he spun around, eyes wide in disbelief. The figure of Mrs. Plumridge faltered, the glint of brass piercing through the raindrops spinning down from above, and just like that, she crumpled silently to the ground. Every instinct surged within Father Brown as he rushed forward to her side, pulse racing. What he would uncover went far deeper than betrayal. The storm had unleashed its fury, and now the truth lay dangerously close, veering towards a conclusion that none amongst them could escape. Chapter 6. The Portrait with a Secret. The deafening crack of thunder rolled overhead, mingling with the chaotic echoes of screams and cries that had warped the atmosphere beyond reason. Father Brown stood frozen before the grand estate's gallery, his heart drumming a frantic rhythm as shadows danced maliciously around him, slick with the residue of recent chaos. All around, candle flames flickered uncertainly, throwing dark silhouettes that spiraled like intruders against the ornate walls, where portraits of the deceased hung, a haunting display of time and ambition rendered in oil and canvas, graced with the aura of those long past. "Stay back," barked Mr. Johnson, fear rippling through his once composed demeanor. The man stood huddled near the door, eyes darting with suspicion like a startled animal, as if waiting for the curtain of shadows to reveal some sinister truth. But Father Brown's focus shifted away from him, towards a particularly imposing portrait, one of the vicar himself, Vicar Cook. Perhaps it was the melding of stormlight with candle glow, or the deeper shadows collecting around the frame, but there was something about it now that struck him as wholly unnatural. The vicar's expression was unsettling, sorrowful, yet defiant, as if aware that unseen threads of fate coiled dangerously around him. With the storm raging outside, every creak of the old estate seemed to vibrate with foreboding. It was then that Father Brown's practiced eye caught an anomaly. Between the portrait's heavy frame and the wall, a sliver of parchment peeked out, a mere whisper of white amidst the oppressive shadows. He stepped closer, the air growing thick, suffocating with secrets lying just beyond the surface. He hesitated. Perhaps it was the residue of fear that held him captive. The piercing sound of another bolt of thunder roused him, bringing his hand forward, fingers trembling at the strange weight of anticipation. "Father Brown." Mrs. Delancey's voice shattered through his reverie. He turned, noting her ghostly pallor as though the storm had siphoned every ounce of warmth from her being. "We cannot linger here. We must find the others. There's talk of another gunshot." "Just a moment," he replied absently, his voice thick with concentration. He reached toward the paper, drawing it free from its confinement with careful precision. For a moment, he simply stood there, feeling the fabric of dread weave tighter around them, and then unfolded it, revealing a hastily scrawled message that sent a chill coursing through his veins. Tension knotted in the air as he scanned the words. "The vicar knew too much. They seek to silence him. Protect yourself, for the truth cannot remain buried." "Father Brown," Mrs. Delancey implored, the urgency in her tone sharpened to an edge. "What does it say?" But he was already processing the implications, racing through the contours of this labyrinthine mystery that entangled them all. The storm outside seemed to howl in agreement, the winds howling through the estate as if they sought to communicate their harrowing tale. It implies a conspiracy around Vicar Cook's death. Someone was intent on silencing him, and now those who knew too much are under threat. Fear lurks behind every shadow. At that moment, Mr. Johnson stepped forward, eyes flaring with accusation. "You believe we're involved in this? Do you think we wanted Cook dead?" Father Brown's gaze caught the flicker of panic across Mr. Johnson's brow, a betrayal of his guilt. "Not all of us," he replied, choosing his words with careful deliberation. "But we must consider that each of you could be a suspect until we can illuminate the truth. Secrets are the whetstones in the light of dusk. They bear witness to those who would tamper with the past." The tension thickened, and Mrs. Delancey seemed to shrink within herself, while Mr. Johnson's indignation swelled. "Do not pretend as if you are above suspicion. You have invaded this family's grief, unleashed chaos upon us." "Grief breeds desperation, Mr. Johnson," Father Brown said quietly, looking back toward the portrait, the vicar's eyes seemingly burning into him, a reminder of the burden of truth that lay before them. "And desperation often leads to catastrophic decisions." He took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of varnish and old wood, before his attention captured a glint near the edge of the portrait frame where he had found the letter, an object barely revealing itself. He leaned in, thrusting a hand behind the frame once more, and gripped another unusual artifact, a small locket, intricately carved, the sort that whispered of hidden sentiments or secrets locked away in the hearts of those long departed. "What else do you find?" Mrs. Delancey breathed, her curiosity piqued against a backdrop of dread. "Only more questions," Father Brown replied, opening the locket with a quiet deliberation. Inside, to his astonishment, was not a simple photograph, but instead a miniature handwritten note, faint yet legible, words curling themselves into a threatening proclamation of their own. "Betrayal is a disease, and I'll not let it flourish." Then, as if in concert with the ominous echo of the storm, the gallery door creaked open, revealing a darkened entrance that seemed to swallow the light. The air vibrated with tension as every inhabitant of the room turned, faces paling further still, dread saturating the atmosphere like a poison. And from that threshold emerged another figure, silhouetted by the storm. "Did I overhear talk of betrayal?" Mrs. Plumridge's voice cut through the air, a dagger poised delicately yet lethally against unseen flesh. "Perhaps the truth is not as we wanted it to be." The room seemed to lurch, the shadows conspiring to cloak her intentions as she approached. Panic twisted in Father Brown's gut as realization dawned. Here was another player in a game that none could fully understand, a web spun tight around them all. But before he could utter a word, before the very fabric of revelation could unfurl, the shadows around them shifted surreptitiously, and the thunder roared, drowning out any plea for reason, for the air crackled with an uninvited tremor. And then, from the darkness that consolidated behind Mrs. Plumridge, a sharp expression of fear passed across her face, her eyes widening in a mirror of absolute chilling terror. Only then did Father Brown catch the movement. Dark figures, materializing from the recesses of the estate, cloaked and spectral, they stepped forward with malicious intent. "Run!" The command burst from his lips, but the sound barely penetrated the oncoming storm of chaos. The gallery trembled, shadows breaking free from confinement, and as the grasp of revelation taunted him, a revelation so dangerous it pulsed like a heartbeat, Father Brown felt time slip away as fate drew inexorably closer, closing in upon them like the storm that howled against all windows. Chapter 7. A shadow at matins. A scream echoed through the storm-lashed hall, sharp and chilling, as if a ghost had risen up from the past to claw at the living. Father Brown spun toward the source, the flickering candlelight dimming ominously, shadows closing in, like vultures circling a fallen beast. His heart raced, not merely from fear, but from a profound sense that the darkness looming over the estate concealed more than just the storm's fitful rage. "We must move," he barked, gripping Mrs. Delancey's arm as they fled the claustrophobic gallery, leaving the spectral portrait of Vicar Cook and its buried secrets to loom behind them, accusatory and still. The thunder outside roared in concert with the beastly winds, creating a hellish symphony that drowned out the more subtle expressions of climax and dread. They rushed toward the great hall, its aged wooden beams creaking under the weight of anticipation and fear, a weary protector of untold truths. Candles flickered perilously as Mr. Johnson met them in a half-crouch, as though the very air around had thickened to hinder his mobility. His eyes were wide in terror. "What's happened?" he asked breathlessly, an echo of panic threading through his voice. Father Brown drew closer, trying to mask his own apprehension with steady resolve. "Surely you heard the scream and the gunshot. There is something far more sinister at play within these walls, I fear." Just then, another resounding crash of thunder, closely followed by lightning, illuminated the room for a breathtaking moment, casting an eerie glow across Mr. Johnson's features, sharpening the lines of worry etched upon his brow. "What are we waiting for? We can't remain here," he hissed, as if their very lives hung by a thread, suspended between the desperate past and an uncertain future. But Father Brown's instincts screamed for caution. He noticed odd details, the way shadows clung unnaturally to the corners of the room, as if preordained to cloak secrets that yearned to remain undiscovered. His gaze flicked to the far wall where another portrait hung, this one of Mrs. Plumridge. There was something about her gaze, resolute and almost reflective of the very storm outside, that sent shivers down his spine. "We cannot rush blindly into this with fear. There is something deeper driving these events," he murmured, just as a brisk, hurried footfall echoed from the barricaded hallway. Mrs. Plumridge burst into the room, her clothes drenched from the rain, and her face a ghastly shade of pallor. "Father Brown," she gasped, holding out something small and white, trembling in her fingertips. This was left on the doorstep. It was a letter, not merely any letter, but one that bore the familial crest of the vicarage, dark ink rendered stark against the swirling rain. Father Brown stepped forward, scrutinizing the terror-stricken face before him. If nothing else, the depths of her fear seemed sincere, even genuine. The foreboding air thickened further as she attempted to catch her breath. "What does it say?" Mr. Johnson demanded impatiently, eyes darting back toward the shadows as if expecting new horrors to emerge. Father Brown carefully unfolded the fragile missive, each crinkle of the parchment seeming to echo like a gunshot in the silence. The words were clear, yet chilling. "My beloved, if you wish to save your children, remove the veil that covers your heart. Time is running out. Betrayers lurk in your very household." Father Brown felt a shiver as he read the letter aloud, each syllable charged with the electric tension of provocation. The children, could they be in danger? Or is this merely a diversion? He speculated, locking eyes with Mrs. Plumridge. Her expression twisted from anxiety into something more profound, fear mingled with recognition, as if the letter resonated with hidden knowledge closely guarded. Then There's more at stake than mere familial strife, isn't there? She whispered, her voice tight with anguish. As her words hung in the thickening air, Father Brown sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The portrait of Mrs. Plumridge seemed to respond, her painted eyes glistening as if holding unspoken truths that begged for release. Suddenly, Mrs. Delancey screamed again, but this time it was a strangled sound, bursting forth as though the embodiment of her own desperation. "Look, the window!" She pointed toward the great bay, where the wind had torn at the frames. A shadow crossed the glass, an indistinct form, half-formed and lingering, as though caught between two realms. The eerie outline was gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the unease threaded through the room, thick as the storm outside. "I saw it. It moved," she insisted, stepping back as if the very atmosphere had turned treacherous. "A figure. Someone is out there." Father Brown's mind raced, the pieces of this disjointed puzzle fraying at the edges, only to be pulled tighter around an unseen force, drawing them all into its clutches. The letter spoke of betrayal, of hidden motives yet to surface. He turned to Mrs. Plumridge, watching her facial features sharpen with realization. "There's a history to these shadows, isn't there? You know something, perhaps about the vicar's fascination that spiraled into something more sinister?" Her mouth tightened, and suddenly Father Brown felt the layered weight of secrets collapsing around him, leaving only the raw truth of desperation. "This estate holds memories that ought to remain buried," she confessed, each word a tremor of regret. "But deep within lies a flame that sparked long before the storm." "I must know," he pressed, voice firm. "What truth is it that you conceal?" But before she could respond, a soft yet ominous sound sliced through the tension, a rasping knock at the massive oak door. It was out of place amidst the turmoil, a deliberate beckoning that interrupted their spiraling descent into darkened revelations. Father Brown had instinctively taken a step towards the door when it burst open, and in the next breath, an avalanche of shadow poured into the room, revealing the last figure they ever expected. "You shouldn't be here," hissed a voice that should have elicited comfort, but instead poured dread into the very walls of the estate. It was the vicar's voice, warped and hollow, though a shadow of the man who should have been put to rest. "I've come to save you," he continued, a grim illusion in the storm swirling outside, rending the fabric of reality and plunging them into unyielding chaos once again. As Father Brown's heart sank, caught between the echoes of a past driven to unleash new horrors, darkness encircled him, and the world fell away into a vortex where everything he thought he knew began to unravel. Behind him, Mrs. Plumridge's hand tightened around her throat, gripped by an incomprehensible terror, and a soft thud echoed ominously across the hall, as if fate's hand was poised to strike once again. Chapter 8. The Stained Glass Revelation. The clamor of splintering glass crashed through the air like an exclamation point, sharp and jarring. Father Brown barely had time to reorient himself as the vivid shards exploded from the window, a storm of colored fragments swirling around him like a kaleidoscope of doom. "Stay behind me," he shouted instinctively, though his own heart raced with the uncertainty of the danger that loomed both inside and outside the estate. The storm outside howled, like a beast unleashed, wind shrieking through the estate's cracked stone walls, while the eerie proximity of the silhouette it had unveiled lent a fevered urgency to the moment. As the last pieces of the shattering glass tumbled away, the illuminated shapes of the stained glass window behind him glared down with their frosty colors. Vibrant reds, bleak blues, and sickly greens merging with the tumult of their situation. Yet, it was the figure depicted in the glass that caught Father Brown's eye amidst the chaos, a garish depiction of a tortured saint, adorned in chains, his gaze turned downward, as if mourning an unseen betrayal. The artistry felt oddly menacing, pulsing with an energy that mirrored his own rising dread. "What thread of fate binds this to our plight?" he mused under his breath, a thought that rippled through the air thick with foreboding. Mrs. Plumridge stood beside him, her eyes filled with panic, reflecting the hues of chaos around them. "Father, please, we need to leave this place now," she implored, her voice wavering. "This is madness." But even as she spoke, his mind raced, not towards escape, but toward understanding. Each swirl of storm and glass seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle. The vivid colors of the saint were, after all, unfurling a deeper connection woven through the very fabric of the estate. "Look at the insignia," he exclaimed suddenly, pointing toward the emblem etched in the glass, the intricate design almost obscured beneath, waterlogged misery. "Do you recognize it?" The letter left on the doorstep echoed in his mind, the urgent pleas whispered from its ink, blotting the air with thick uncertainty. Mrs. Plumridge squinted at the emblem, hesitation flickering across her features. "Of course, it's the symbol of the vicarage," she stammered. "I've seen it many times in the archives." Her voice trailed off, as recognition mixed with dismay. Shadows from the past coiled menacingly at the edges of their present. But why here? Why now? Before Father Brown could respond, a muffled sound echoed from the corner, drawing his gaze. Mr. Johnson stood rigid, as if crystallized by an ice of dread, his figure in stark contrast to the confusion swirling around them. That window, it's said to have remained sealed for decades. No one should have been able to shatter it, he murmured, voice teetering between disbelief and tangible fear. This signifies something. The tremor in his voice bore the weight of implication, layering the already thick tension of the room. "There speaks a man burdened by knowledge," Father Brown thought. His intuition ignited like a flame against the encroaching night. "Mr. Johnson," he began, his voice steady yet urgent, "what do you know of this glass? What does it reveal?" He watched as Mr. Johnson flinched at the inquiry, but remained mute, wrestling with an inner struggle, a truth threading its way between the vividness of the window and the shadows that thrummed around them. "It was the last piece of the vicar's collection," Mr. Johnson murmured finally, his eyes darting between the broken shards and the now frightened occupants of the hall. Deadly relations that poisoned the last years of his life. Jealousy and vengeance among those who felt sacrificed. He hesitated, the silence filled with memory, then added, "It's said to be cursed." Mrs. Plumridge turned sharply, her voice heated. "Cursed or not, we can't linger here. We've already been threatened." She gestured dramatically toward the door, still slick and drenched from the storm, while her appeal hung in the air, countered only by the encroaching shadows, lurking just beyond the flickering light. Father Brown stepped closer to the fragmentary glory of the stained glass, forcing himself to absorb the image of the saint. A figure bound yet hopeful. "The saint bears chains, yes," he announced, as if he had come to a profound conclusion. "But chains can be broken, and shadows can only thrive in darkness. This is not merely superstition, Mrs. Plumridge. This window represents not just the past, but the tangled roots of betrayal between us." His words cut through the cacophony of doubt like a sharp knife, in a forgotten prayer. Just then, as if summoned by his exposé, the doors of the great hall slammed open, and a gust of wind poured in, snatching away the last remnants of warmth and clarity. A figure emerged from the tempest, the chilling silhouette dressed in dark attire, but marked by an unmistakable familiarity. "You thought me severed from this world, yet here I stand," intoned the man, his voice carrying an unnatural echo, sounding almost like a dirge. Father Brown's heart lurched in disbelief as he recognized the spectral form. The vicar, a phantom, rendered in a ghastly shade of grey, yet more corporeal than the fears he had chased since the onset of their ordeal. "You should abandon this wretched place." The vicar's voice bore an enigma layered in, foreboding, and the intensity of his gaze fell upon Mrs. Plumridge. "Or you will find all that you cherish caught in the snare of your past." Thunder erupted again, deafening and shattering. The world outside seemed to convulse, setting alight a primal instinct within Father Brown. He stepped forward, heart pounding, with a tangled sense of dread and resolution. "You speak of shadows and curses, yet the truth is, what can illuminate? Tell us what binds you to this madness." But as the storm outside crescendoed with an accompanying cry from within the walls, a crashing sound like the tolling of a death knell, there beneath the brightly colored shards of glass that lay scattered amidst the splintered wood, a distant object shone, a glimmering glint that beckoned like a lantern in the dark. Father Brown's eyes widened with alarm. It was the unmistakable shape of a dagger. "Wait," he urged, feeling the weight of fate aligning as he reached for the hidden truth. But the storm grew more violent. The shadows seemed to pulse with malevolence, and time was slipping as the implications crashed like the beleaguering thunder outside. In that precarious moment, fate drew back its cruel hand, and uncertainty breathed down his neck. Clarity was within grasp, yet darkness encircled him ever tighter. The past raged in a symphony of betrayal. Who among them would be willing to pierce the veil? Chapter 9. The Cross in the Attic. The echo of a heavy footfall reverberated through the dim attic, drowning out the distant rumble of thunder and sending a ripple of dread through Father Brown. Faint candlelight flickered, casting undulating shadows that twisted like ghosts against the slanted walls adorned with dust and memories. As he took a step deeper into the room, a sudden flash illuminated a tableau of fear, each face reflecting a combination of curiosity and raw anxiety, compelling Father Brown to address them, each suspect cloaked in an aura thicker than the storm threatening outside. The air felt heavy with anticipation, as if the very rafters were groaning under the weight of secrets longing to be unburdened. "Thank you for gathering here," Father Brown began, his voice steady, yet the tension in his gut suggested the stakes were perilously high. "Though some may think it madness to be brought together in this forsaken attic, I believe we stand on the precipice of revelation." His eyes swept across the assembled one by one, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Plumridge, and an uneasy presence lurking in the corner, all drawn irrevocably into the vortex of recent events. The dim light from the candles flickered anxiously, playing tricks as the shadows danced unnervingly. As he spoke, the storm outside howled with a ferocity one could almost imagine as a living thing, wrapping talons around the estate, whispering of foreboding. A crack of lightning pierced the gloom, momentarily revealing the cobwebbed corners of the attic, and Father Brown noticed a glittering pot of tarnished copper, the cross the vicar once prized so dearly. Its heavy presence radiated a sinister energy, and for a moment it appeared to breathe with the storm's anger. "What are you trying to achieve?" Mr. Johnson croaked, his voice edged with uncertainty and resentment. "You speak of revelation, but what do we gain from this? I'd wager that the less said in this attic, the better." Expression suggested that darkness had already seeped into his soul. "On the contrary, Mr. Johnson," Father Brown countered, meeting the man's gaze unflinchingly, "it is here, surrounded by these forgotten shadows, that the light of truth can pierce the veil of our despair. Perhaps it is this very fear that binds us." His voice resonated through the rafters, as if the spectre of the vicar, an ever-watchful presence, hovered just outside their recognition. Mrs. Plumridge, visibly trembling, clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders as the air turned chilling. "What truth, Father? Please, we've been haunted long enough." Her voice quivered, but beneath the fear lay a flicker of defiance. "Are we to surf this tempest of emotions until we are swallowed whole? You have promised revelations, yet I sense only despair." With deliberate calm, Father Brown advanced toward the tarnished cross, and though he studied it, his eyes bore through the centuries of dust and neglect. "This emblem," he began, feeling the weight of every eye upon him as if the air itself was tethered to his revelations. "It symbolizes suffering, the weight of guilt, secrets turning in agony. Like our proceeding here today, the darkness we hide within ourselves binds our hearts." As he spoke, he plucked an unholy dust mote from the cross and reflected on their surroundings, breathing in the stale air that crackled with tension. The candles flickered low, creating a chilling spectacle, the light undulating with the angst of fears that had not yet been revealed. "Each of us has known betrayal. Each of us continues to wear our burdens as chains." His voice grew fervent. "Let us unveil the truths we prefer to cloak in silence." "Enough," barked a voice from the shadows. The figure stepped forward, revealing glinting eyes falling like mists upon the group. "You don't know what you're igniting with your words, Brown." It was revealed to be Mrs. Plumridge's son, Edward, his brow slick with sweat. "We are not mere playthings for your intellectual circus." Before Father Brown could respond, a loud crash coincided with a gust of wind that slammed against the attic window, the old glass rattling as if yearning to escape the storm's grasp. "Now, do you truly believe there is no stake involved here?" Edward pressed, eyes now aflame with a mix of conviction and desperation. Father Brown turned sharply, the juxtaposition of light and shadow playing out their own narrative across Edward's handsome yet troubled features. "Desperation is the breeding ground for deeper truths," he countered, stepping closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of revealing deeper motives. "What lies beneath your surface, Edward? There is an urgency in your tone that speaks of something more profound." "I am not like you, Father," Edward spat, attempting to mask pain with anger. "You think your presence alone will unearth kinds of villainy in this attic? You speak of chains, yet you chain us to the past." Certain vulnerability flickered beneath his defiance, unraveling the bravado of a son, molded by a legacy he wished to escape. "Sometimes all chains indeed require is recognition," murmured Father Brown softly. The storm broke outside, and a flash of lightning illuminated the attic momentarily, casting fluttering shadows on the cross, winding shadows that whispered of unconfessed sins and envy. As the tempest raged on, a sudden realization hit him. An echo from their past was trapped within the very supposition of this gathering, and all eyes were fixed upon the cross. Yet it was the vicar's twisted legacy they truly examined in this attic sanctuary of tortured memories. The word betrayal hung thick in the air, threading through the fabric of their rising dread. "Tell us, Edward," Father Brown summoned, yet his voice lowered to almost an intimate whisper, dangerous in its softness. "Was your mother part of the circle that encircled the vicar's passion? Did you blame him for far more than mere scorn?" The unexpected silence that fell was pregnant with expectation, yet around them, the thunder crashed again, mirroring their tumult. As Edward opened his mouth to respond, the entire attic shook, and the cross tumbled unceremoniously off the shelf, shattering as it hit the dirt floor below. A gasp erupted from Mrs. Plumridge, freezing even the echoes of the storm outside. But amid the scattered shards, a hidden object glinted dully at Father Brown's feet. A blackened envelope, stained by time and potentially blood. He bent to retrieve it, pulse racing at the possibility it might hold answers to the questions he dared not voice. Before he could unveil the potential contents within this shocking artifact, thunder exploded right above their heads, quaking the very foundations of reality, and in that terrifying moment, amidst the cacophony of sound and light, a figure darted forward in the confusion, desperation painting their face in hues of betrayal. Father Brown's breath caught in his throat, abruptly aware that beneath the patterns of chaos, the fabric of their very lives was about to tear apart. The attic walls quaked as he grasped the envelope, and before the shock of the moment could subside, a scream echoed from the darkness just beyond, impossibly close, swallowing any chance of retreat. One truth would pierce the suffocating air, one revelation would emerge, igniting both fear and revelation. Who among them possessed the dagger of their destiny? Chapter 10. The Gathering Storm. The air exploded with a violent crash, the shards of the tarnished cross scattering like forgotten dreams upon the dirt floor of the attic, 100 years of guilt shattering in a heartbeat as a scream, a lifeless wail, echoed off the rafters above. Father Brown's heart raced, caught between the urgency of the moment and the suffocating atmosphere of dread, wrapping tightly around him like the tendrils of the storm outside. The flicker of flame from the candles cast monstrous shadows in wild disarray, twisting the faces of the assembled into grotesque masks of panic. Yet amidst chaos, clarity beckoned just out of reach. "Mother!" Edward's voice rang with desperation, his sharp gaze darting toward the doorway that led to the darkness beyond. He was all too aware of what whispered in the dark, the fear of more than mere ghosts lurking in the shadows, echoing the past that threatened to engulf them all. A weighty pause hung in the air, thick with disbelief, and yet there was something undeniably more sinister stirring just beneath the surface of their fears. Father Brown took a slow step forward, mind racing through the connections, the clandestine bonds that wove their lives together like the tangled roots of an ancient tree. He deliberately kept the blackened envelope close, its ominous presence reminding him that they were not merely enacting some absurd investigative play. The stakes had grown perilously real. He had felt its weight in his hands, not just in material form, but in the burden of hidden truths clamoring to be uncovered. Truths that the storm itself seemed all too eager to reveal as it raged outside. "Edward," he breathed, steadying his voice against the turbulent protestations of the storm and even the very souls that surrounded him. "What have you done? Tell us what haunts you here tonight, not just the specter of your memories." But a new element pressed against them, an invasive breath of anguish weaving through the air. Mrs. Plumridge stepped closer, her face ghostly pale, lips trembling as they formed his name. "Father, you must understand. I sent him away that evening. I thought I was protecting us." Her words hung heavy, as if the weight of her guilt could be felt in the air like the cold touch of a spirit lost. "But he cannot come back. Not now. Not while we are all trapped in this house of secrets. I thought it prudent to keep all secrets from you, for your protection," Edward snapped, his voice spiking with agitation. "You sent him away, and yet you brought us here to confront our past like some parlor game. How dare you presume to unearth that which should remain undisturbed?" But Father Brown observed not only Edward's frantic demeanor, the way his fingers trembled against the remnants of the shattered cross, but also the way Mrs. Plumridge's features took on a newfound intensity, the fight rising within her as the storm outside raged with a deafening roar. There was a dance of desperation fluttering between them, like moths attracted to a flame, longing to shed light, but fearful of the burn. "Tell me," he urged, keeping his tone almost quiet. "What are you hiding, Mrs. Plumridge? Why did you feel the need to protect your son from whatever you believe awaits him?" Instead of answering, Mrs. Plumridge turned her back to them both, as if attempting to escape the very questions that fashioned their reality. "I could not let him suffer the vicar's wrath, Father. You cannot know the depth of his temperament." "What temperament?" Edward shot back, his voice rising, igniting the electric tension in the room. Desperation bubbled into fury, erupting like the ferocity of the storm. "What have you done that you feel you must shield me from? It is your secret that chokes us all." Father Brown's instincts prickled, understanding that the blood-stained letters from the past whispered of more than mere guilt. They held the echoes of betrayal that could yet claim another soul. The implications wound tighter around them, a noose of their making, as the truth loomed, bold and sinister. Perhaps the true sin was not in the actions of the vicar himself, but in the complicit silence that distorted familial binds in this cursed estate. "You speak of wrath, yet your own heart harbors darkness, my boy," he said sharply, his gaze piercing Edward's self-protective mask, sensing the deeper currents of shame battling against the surface. "There is no storm that cannot be calmed by the truth. Which of us, I wonder, will strike the first blow against our sorrowful past?" Thunder answered him, a low growl that promised violence, but offered little explanation as to where that violence might settle. Edward's eyes flared, and in that moment, the silence shattered as he lunged forward, grabbing the envelope from Brown's grasp. A flash of fury, striking deeper than the storm's thunderclaps outside. "No more," he shouted, hands trembling, rage boiling from within his chest. "You shall not bury me with your accursed shades." In the pulse of that frantic moment, the body of Mrs. Plumridge swayed, her hand clutching the doorframe, and Father Brown sensed the mentioning of the scent of betrayal wafting through the room like the distant smell of smoke rising from the embers of a dying fire. "Do you not see, Edward?" she whispered harshly, her tone shrill with urgency. "To speak those names even now is to awaken forces which should remain undisturbed." Without warning, Edward wrenched the envelope open, jerking toward the candlelight. An anguished look upon his face. What was written within sent an electric charge through the air, simmering beneath his skin. The room felt too still for a moment, confusion oscillating through each person present. It lay on the table between them, inviting yet terrifying, the twist of fate poised to unravel before their very eyes as the wind howled like a banshee outside. With a swift motion, Father Brown leaned closer, feeling pulled toward the truth encased within the pages of the letter, as Edward's hand trembled like a leaf caught in the tempest. "Don't," he warned imperatively. "What's in there could change everything." Before the last word crossed Father Brown's lips, the floor beneath them trembled ominously, a shudder that seemed to rise from the very bones of the house, and then, without warning, collapsed into darkness. Edward's scream sliced through the air, followed by the sound of splintering wood, the candle's flame extinguishing abruptly as shadows consumed them whole. In that chaos, the dreadful realization dawned upon Father Brown. A secret had been unleashed. They found themselves now in a race not just against the tempest outside, but against their very own secrets that threatened to claim them before the truth could ever be unearthed. Above the tumult of despair, Father Brown felt the icy breath of fate draw near, whispering truths, and the descent had only just begun. Chapter 11. The Mercy of the Murderer. The thunderclap exploded overhead as if the heavens had shattered, mirroring the chaos that enveloped them in the suffocating darkness of the collapsed attic. Father Brown instinctively reached for Edward amidst the enveloping shadows, the flickering glow of the remaining candles struggling against the encroaching blackness. His heart raced, sensing imminent danger lurking. A final climax of torturous truths was poised to unfold. "Edward," he called, his voice strained against the tumult of the storm. Panic clung to every syllable, as if the very walls reverberated in fear. From the quiet void, a sound pierced through, a sharp inhale, filled with dread, then a shaky whisper, echoing the crack of thunder. "I'm here, Father, but do not move," Father Brown cautioned, squinting into the darkness as he struggled to discern if Edward had been trapped beneath the wreckage. Clenching the envelope, the promise of its secrets remained in his grasp. An ominous talisman amid the storm that swirled both outside and within their tumultuous gatherings. Shadows twisted and writhed, casting moving specters onto the fragmented souls that hovered at the edges of his consciousness. Then, the ghostly pale light of the candles flickered back into existence, ignited by a reckless gust. Father Brown's eyes scanned the immediate surroundings, revealing Edward standing, trembling at the far end of the room. But there was something in his posture, something more than terror, that gripped him. "Father Brown," Edward's voice quivered, a stark contrast to the furious storm outside. "You don't understand. What's in that letter? It's not just a revelation. It's a curse." His words dripped with anguish as he glanced back toward the darkness beyond, where the secrets lay buried like the ruins of their shattered past. "Then let us break the curse," Father Brown replied steadily, struggling to suppress the shivers rising in him. "You must confront whatever hideous truths lie within its embrace." He felt a sudden weight resting upon him. Each soul present bore scars of history too profound to ignore, bound together by threads of guilt and regret. "But can we confront it?" Mrs. Plumridge's voice emerged, trembling softly, an echo of something deeper. Her ghostly visage appeared illuminated by candlelight, revealing shadows etched across her furrowed brow, an unsettling reflection of sorrow. "What if we are not prepared for the truth? What if it demands more than we can give?" "Better an agonizing truth than a comfortable lie," he replied, searching her shifty gaze for sincerity. Driven by an instinct that surged through him, he took a step closer to Edward, who now clutched the envelope as if it were a lifeline, a vessel containing the key to a mystery that could either liberate or imprison. The silence between them expanded, filled with unvoiced accusations and buried fears. As he stepped forward, Father Brown's keen eyes caught a glint of metal glimmering just beyond where the floor had succumbed to the void. He turned his scrutiny back to Edward. "What drove you to that cursed correspondence? I sense underlying impulses in your struggle. You fear what you may discover. Could it be guilt manifesting as dread?" "Guilt," Edward hissed, his voice filled with incredulity. "You think I am guilty? I am the one seeking answers. All I wanted was to escape that man's shadow." His face contorted in a mixture of anguish and rage. "I watched him destroy everything he touched. The vicar," he spat, "was a monster disguised as our savior." The intensity of his words pierced the air like shards of glass, but Father Brown maintained his composure, feeling the heartbeat of morality pulsating through every accusation. "The vicar's sins may have marred your life, but can you accept the burden of guilt, Edward? You knew of his transgressions, yet you did not act. Was it out of love or cowardice?" Suddenly, the candlelight flickered once more, casting eerie shadows that danced across the jagged remains of the roof timbers like mourners circling the funeral pyre. The atmosphere thickened into a palpable, smothering shroud. "I thought I could end it," Edward confessed with a shiver, his eyes pools of despair, "to rid us of his presence forever." "End it?" Father Brown's voice raised into a sharp whisper. "You do not mean—" But before he could finish, a wordless scream sliced through the dark space around them, striking like lightning. The source emerged, a figure framed in smoke and the frantic shadows of the storm. Their brooding, spectre-like memories coalesced into form. "I loved him." The voice carried the tremor of loss and anguish. Beneath the disarray and discontent, it was the very essence of guilt that caused Mrs. Plumridge to take a hesitant step forward, her hands trembling toward the darkness that began to crawl closer. "The vicar was mine before he belonged to all of you," she cried, collapsing to her knees, her voice cracking under the weight of heavy confession. "Every day since that bitter autumn evening haunts me. It was I who sent him away that night, believing I could save him from ruin." Father Brown's heart raced, standing at the precipice of tangled emotions as the vortex of her anguish intensified. "Do you realize, Mrs. Plumridge, that your protection may have become your misjudgment? By forcing him into shadows, did you unwittingly awaken the darker spectre of his nightmares?" "I thought I could control it. I thought—" But her words fell away into the mire of cacophony that had claimed the air once more, drowning them in a maelstrom of guilt. There was a lingering sense, however, in the unvoiced fragments between them, that grim certainty which warned of the darker implications rising within the room. The candles flickered, and just as thunder rumbled outside, Edward let forth a chilling proclamation, a desperate yet haunting sentence that hung suspended, aching in the Yule air. What if I ended the vicar's torment myself? What if I became the mercy of the murderer? The silence that followed twisted like barbed wire beneath Father Brown's skin, and before he could even grasp the weight of the revelation, the echoing creak of the house reverberated ominously. The ground beneath them shuddered again. Something was shifting, threatening to unleash the climax of their buried sins, unexpected, dizzying, and that dark brush with destiny loomed just ahead. "Edward," he called out, but the very floor surged beneath as the candles extinguished abruptly, plunging them once more into chilling darkness. Disorienting confusion engulfed them, and with a visceral jolt of apprehension, the sound of shattered glass cracked suddenly like thunder. promising that mercy would soon cut through the heart of their tangled web, whether they dared to embrace it or not. Chapter 12. The Last Confession. The air crackled with tension, a shudder of energy that mirrored the tumult outside as the wind shrieked past, battering the walls of the old house. The world darkened like an ink blot, and in that murk, the thud of a heartbeat echoed louder than any clap of thunder. Too loud, too close. Father Brown, straining against the oppressive quiet, felt goosebumps rise on his arms as shadows slithered like sinister serpents around him. "Edward, can you hear me?" His voice barely escaped, a threadbare whisper threatening to snap under the weight of dread. "A tragedy has turned to farce," Edward muttered, the melancholy in his tone thickening the darkness around them. "For how can I trust my own hands, Father? They held the weapon that extinguished the light." The tremor in his voice resonated with despair, a chord that struck deep in Father Brown's heart, forcing him closer against the tempest of swirling emotions. Edward, standing on the precipice of calamity, embodied the turmoil of secrets ravaging their souls. Wisps of candlelight flickered back to life, revealing the disarray of the crumbling attic. Splintered floorboards and fallen beams created a labyrinth of anguish. And yet, amidst the chaos, there lay the envelope, the vessel of shadows. With an instinct that transcended logic, Father Brown reached for it once more, unearthing its weighty portent even as the gale wailed outside, a mourning for dreams long dashed. "You must face it, Edward. The letter holds the key to understanding who you are, what you are." "What I am." Edward's eyes glistened in the candle's glow, vulnerable and raw as the truth pierced the haze. "I had to fight the legacy of that man. How could I live with the knowledge that he was not only my vicar, but my tormentor as well? The sins of my family wrapped tighter every day, dragging us all into the mire. It's why I sought the truth behind those letters, why I became the monster." "No," Father Brown countered, the urgency ingraining itself in his tone. "You became a man who thought he could end suffering. But even now, in this darkness, you must decide whether to emerge into the light of truth or remain paralyzed by fear." In the flickering light, Mrs. Plumridge stirred, her shadow intermingling with the heavier darkness as her pained whisper crept into their conversation like a ghost. "Can we truly atone for such sins? The vicar's blood forever stains these hands. What haunted me was not merely his death, but the love I once held for him, clouded by betrayal." "Conflicted souls seeking redemption," Father Brown mused, stepping deliberately closer, striving to draw from the well of their hidden motives. "Your connection to him runs deep, as does your regret, Mrs. Plumridge. But instead of despair, might you realize that it is this burden of humanity which makes the heart truly beat?" "What do you know of my heart?" she snapped, her voice sharp as a shard of glass. "What can you understand of affection turned to loathing, of love birthed in suffocation? You wield only the comfort of your faith." An ambivalence flickered in the air, igniting tension that coiled like smoke. Father Brown, sharp in observation, glanced at Edward, who stood rigid, his hands clenched around the envelope still. "Your actions stem from fear, Edward. Do not mistake it for courage. The heart reveals truths in the guise of what it must protect." A flash of fury danced across Edward's features. "Is that truly what you see? I sought to shield us. The vicar would have turned our lives into ashes. I did what no one else dared. I wore the cloak of merciful judgment." Merciful judgment? Father Brown's voice was low, heavy with the weight of scrutiny. Violence has no virtue. The truth you find in that letter demands confrontation, not a weapon of vengeance. As lightning split the sky outside, illuminating the room for a fleeting moment, it cast a fearsome shadow on the remnants of their shattered lives. Your choice will define the repercussions, he continued, guiding the conversation into murkier waters. Reeling from guilt only spawns a cycle of sorrow. Are you prepared to bear the seed of murder? Stop, Edward implored, his composure cracking. Do not speak that word. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. No one should suffer like the vicar did. I merely wanted to end the cycle. Then open the letter, Father Brown insisted sharply, pointing toward the very source of their turmoil. Embrace the truth instead of weighing it down with the burden of a lie. We cannot resurrect the dead, but we can redeem the living. Redeem? What do I have to redeem? Edward cried, an inkling of panic rising. I've done the unthinkable. Am I to find redemption in my own blood? You don't understand my vengeance. No, but I see its guise, Father Brown responded quietly, fixing Edward with a steadfast gaze. Your rage is but pain turned outward. Behind it lie the echoes of love, the pursuit of closure. You've built a prison of remorse, yet remain a prisoner to your own heart. The question remains, what truth are you willing to confront? Edward, Mrs. Plumridge stepped forward, her voice quivering with urgency. You've allowed despair to drive you. It was nothing more than an attempt to escape a shadow that— Enough, Edward erupted, the bitter screams of the storm outside fading into the background, as if the world had fallen silent. The floor shifted. Beneath them, a low groan echoing through the house, mirroring his turmoil. I am neither saint nor sinner. Perhaps there is only one answer left. Father Brown's heart raced, sensing the terrifying precipice upon which they all teetered. You have a choice. Darkness does not belong to you. Release your shadows. A gunshot. The deafening crack rang through the air, resonating with the thunderclap outside, sending a violent echo surging through Father Brown's veins. The candlelight sputtered and dimmed, leaving a trapdoor of darkness opening before him. Edward stood frozen, a horrified expression creeping across his face, while Mrs. Plumridge fell to the floor, clutching a glimmering object that rolled slowly toward the edge of the void. The envelope catching the last flicker of light, a testament to all they had lost. Father Brown's pulse quickened as he took a step forward, his heart sinking with an impending realization as the shadows darkened further. No, not again, he cried, his voice lost amid the tumult. But the unfolding truth pierced through the storm, a revelation waiting to be unearthed in the abyss before him. What deep, haunting secret lingered in the air, heavy as despair? And was this truly the end of their tangled webs, or only just the beginning of a far more sinister unraveling?